My name is Richard Scharf, and I'm President and CEO of Visit Denver. And I thought it'd be good just to give you a little background. Thank you very much for letting us present this morning. Visit Denver, we're really happy to be the sponsor of your dinner. I think this year will be our 9th year, and we appreciate that. We also appreciate the last 2 ballots that we have run in the city that you have endorsed and supported. And I think that has made Denver a great convention and tourism destination. Now, we're not 100% in that industry, as you know. It's just it makes up a nice sector of our business, and we have about 54,000 employees in the metro area, and that would be all the way from small businesses to attractions like the Nature and Science Museum and things like that are businesses that are in our business. And we generate about, in tourism industry, we generate about $4.6 billion to the economy every year. And is neat for all of us. And what's really neat for all of us is if we took tourism out of our economy, conventions and tourism out of our economy, each household in Denver would have to pay $628 per household in taxes to receive the same benefits and services. Because as you know, visitors pay taxes, just like we do when we go to their cities and their states. Visit Denver is actually a 106-year-old organization. We hosted the 1908 Democratic National Convention. I was not there, but we hosted that, and in 1909, we started the Chamber of Commerce in the city said, how do we go after conventions that come in, spend money, and leave? And so we started then, and we were part of the Chamber of Commerce through 1950, and then we became a private not-for-profit, and we're the official marketing arm for the convention center. We're really motivated to bring people in that spend the night in hotels, because that's how we get funded, by a little piece of that hotel tax that visitors pay. And then we also raise $3 to $4 million a year from our private companies, and that could be anywhere from the Broncos, who are members of ours, to the airlines, to the restaurants, but 95% of our businesses are small businesses. These are service companies, they could be bakeries, they could be florists, that are interested in doing business with a tourist or a conventioneer. So that's pretty much how we are run. We also have a board of directors. So we have 39 community and business leaders from all different segments. To give you an idea, like somebody like a George Sparks is on our board. It gives you, and then we have 2 city council people on our board as well. So that's kind of how we're made up. I feel that sometimes I'm the historian here, but in 2011, I think you remember, in fact, Pat Grant has been on our board he was on our board for 20 years, and we have Paul Andrews now. The story is that the National Western for over a decade had been working on how to survive. I think we all had heard those stories, and also in 2011, we had a group called Outdoor Industries Association wanted to move their big convention to Denver, but they wanted us to double the size of the convention center. And I don't know if you ever read what I said in the Denver Post, you can't build a church for Easter Sunday. So it was one of these ones where we had a lot of customers looking at us and asking the question, what's your next step? So when the mayor got elected in 2011, I think you remember he was handed a situation where the National Western had said, we've been studying this thing for the last 2 decades. We have 4 studies. We can't figure out how to repurpose the land we're on because it's almost undevelopable in the situation it was. We have no money, and we're going to move to Aurora. I think everybody remembers that. They were going to move to the Gaylord, and Susan, you and I had a lot of conversations about that property. And at that time, the mayor just said, you know what, we're going to look at it. We'd like to keep the National Western here. It's part of our roots. It's part of the Colorado roots, and we'd like to do what we can, but we got to study and just figure out what we're going to do. So at the same time, he said, Richard, your convention center generates over $500 million, more than $500 million of economic impact every year. The National Western generates $100 million. These facilities are very similar. They bring people in, they spend their money, they leave. It's a convention, a tourism, and event facility. And for the most part, doesn't cost the residents anything because these facilities are built by visitor taxes. So when you stay in a hotel or rental car, these visitors pay a tax that then goes to pay off the bonds of the convention center. So unless any of us, and I include myself, if any of us do rent a car, stay in a hotel, you will pay for this. But what we did is a survey and found out that nearly 75% of the Denver residents don't rent a car in the city, and they typically don't stay in a hotel. And if you did have family coming in to visit, I will tell you, they'll pay $1.75 for every $100 in a room. So that's how this is set up. So what happened in 11 is we went out and got a strategic advisory committee to look at the feasibility of trying to keep the stock show in the city, and then also to look at the needs of the convention center. Our convention center is 25 years old, and by buildings, that's an older property, and you always want to stay relevant. I'll give you an idea. We were just talking about colleges, and I've got a daughter in college and one in high school, but I will tell you that every child that is graduating today, this world is changing so fast that these associations that are coming in are retooling America. So to give you an idea, we just had American Academy of Family Physicians in, 10,000 people came in for that convention. They had a lot of continuing education because these doctors don't want to, they want to continue to learn, whether it's laser, whether it's some technology, and if they don't go back to college, so they have to stay relevant some way. So they come to conventions. Many of you might come, whether it's Kiwanis or whatever. It could be your, American Bar Association, whatever they're involved in. But a lot of times there's continuing ed, and that's how we're really retooling America, because everything is changing so fast. So anyway, we looked at this. The study came out, and I'm going to let Kelly talk a little bit about the National Western, but the study came out and said the National Western, the facilities are obsolete, and eventually what you're going to do is you are going to lose the show. And there's really, you can't afford the capital improvements on it, and the land is a little, it's cut up by a highway. You've got water issues there. You've got a Coliseum that's 60 years old. You've got a lot of issues out there. You've got an exhibit hall that was actually Hall of Education built, I don't know, close to probably 100 years ago, and then renovated over the time frame. And they said, if you do something, not only can you keep the stock show alive, but you can grow business that currently can't come here. And that's business like equestrian, but it's also business that we do a lot, like NCAA volleyball and things like this. There's going to be an opportunity because these facilities will be multi-purpose. We're going to be able to do more year-round there. And then I'm going to let Kelly talk about the exciting things that added on there with our MOU partners like CSU and the Nature and Science, because that really put this into a different league. At the convention center, what they said is, you're actually losing business that you could get if you added some additional meeting space. Now, remember when I told you outdoor industry wanted us to double the size, they said, you know what, you don't need more exhibit space. You don't need to knock down buildings and build more stuff. What they said is you just need more meeting space. If you build more meeting space, you're going to grow about another $80 million economic impact a year, and you're also going to stay competitive. The lucky thing is the city council, both times when we built the convention center, they said, we're not going to build the first convention center. In 1987, they said this, we're not going to build it unless you build phase 2 or design phase 2. So our city council told us that. So as it turns out, we designed phase 2, and then later, you all supported us when we expanded it. So we expanded the convention center, and at that moment, we grew our business by 62%. When we built the expansion, the city council said, we're not going to build this expansion unless we plan for phase 3, if there ever is. We don't know if there ever is. So we supported the new side of the building so that we could go up. It's cheaper. We own the land. So what we're doing is we're essentially going to go up onto the 3rd floor, the roof, and build some additional meeting space, which will grow our industry. So that's kind of what they said. And I kind of laugh sometimes because when we built that first convention center, we had phone booths. Do you guys remember that? We actually had to design the building with phone booths. And then when we expanded, it was funny, we were ripping out all the phone booths because the cell phones had just come in 1990. We all remember that. And so the technology we were talking about today, this is pretty neat because you got Skype, but that's exactly what's happening in our business. We had the neurological surgeons in, and they were literally on the screen performing a surgery that was going on in Asia, and all the doctors were in the room in our Velcro theater watching it. So the industry has changed a great deal, and that's why we're doing this. Now again, we are not for profit. We're trying to do what can bring more business into Denver. That's really what we want to do. And the nice thing about it, typically for tourists and conventions, it's a clean industry. We really aren't paving roads, we're not building schools, we're not doing things like that. What we're doing is they come in, they stay in a hotel, they go to Cherry Creek or wherever to shop, they eat at our restaurants. Most people have to eat 3 meals a day. They're learning. Some people are business people and they bring their companies back and reinvest in Denver and Colorado. They leave. And for me, it's important because they pay taxes that we don't have to pay. So what are we doing here today? We sat in a room after these studies were done and said, we know there is no appetite to necessarily increase taxes on projects like this, even though we need it. So what we looked at is, the beauty is that the visitor taxes that were put into place to build the Colorado Convention Center were paid off in 2014. Pretty neat investment, generating $500 million economic impact a year and got paid off by the visitors. So we looked at the expansion and we know that the 1.75% on hotel and the 1.75% on car rental tax are set to expire once the expansion is paid off in 9 years, 2023. So what we said is, let's not start a new tax, but let's ask the voters to extend the tax. I think you remember doing this when we built Coors Field, and then we went back and said, since we paid that off in half the time, would you mind if we extended that and built Broncos? So that was how that happened. Yeah.
When did the decision happen to make it into perpetuity, though, instead of cap it at 2038, a 15-year expansion that's now become into perpetuity?
Can you hold that for a second? Yeah. And then, and so that's how we designed this, was no new taxes and an extension of an existing tax. What I'd like to do now, so we can get into questions, I'll turn it over to Kelly, let him go through it real quick from a National Western. Okay, keep.
Sorry. All right. My name is Kelly Leid, and I'm the Executive Director of the North Denver Cornerstone Collaborative, and the National Western is one of 6 projects in this region of the city, basically between I-25 at the west, Colorado Boulevard to the east, County Line to the north, and MLK Boulevard to the south. So there are 3 historic neighborhoods, Globeville area, Swansea, that are at the heart of this work of, and even though they sit at the north end of the city, are very disconnected from the rest of the city because they are part of a historical industrial corridor that has obviously evolved over a number of years. I'm going to have, Jake is holding up the master plan, and all this information is available online. But to pick up from where Richard left off and move, I'm going to focus on the plan. We went to work in 2011. Again, building on previous studies that had been in works for over a decade, we added to those studies to validate that work. And what came out of that exercise was first a new partnership. So Colorado State University, History Colorado, Denver Museum of Nature and Science, the National Western, and the city all joined forces to reimagine what the stock show site could be. And what came out of that was far more than just saving the stock show. And what came out of that was really an opportunity to create a global platform for investing in our state and in our part of the city. And what's really important is that at the heart of that conversation are neighborhoods. So we were very intentional, before we even started the master plan, is that the Globeville plan was adopted late last year, and then the Elyria-Swansea plan was adopted early this year, and then the National Western Plan was informed by those 2 neighborhood plans, and then was adopted in March of this year. And what's unique about the National Western Plan is it not only implements this vision, but it first focuses on implementing some of the neighborhood issues, especially around connectivity that has been so disconnected for so long. So a big part of our initial investment is about reconnecting Globeville area Swansea through the National Western, which has really acted as a donut hole or a void among these neighborhoods. So the campus boundaries are Brighton Boulevard to the east, Race Court to the north, the South Platte to the west, and then we come down below I-70 and then grab the Coliseum. Collectively, at full build-out, this is a 270-acre campus that again goes well beyond just the 16 days a year. The investment that we're asking the voters around has an impact of over 80% of the site is impacted by that investment. It acquires all the land, it remediates the land, it demos existing facilities and does all the site remediation. It entitles the project so that CSU can come on and do research, which they could not do under the current zoning. So there's actually a new designation, a National Western Center campus zoning designation that allows us to do research and education on a global scale. And then it builds the initial infrastructure. So our first investments are actually the road, Washington Street, and then improvements along Brighton. We rebuild or create 49th so that we can load this campus from both the west and the east. Another important point here is that right here at 48th and Brighton, RTD is building the North Metro line, and in 2018 that new train, commuter rail train, will come online, connecting the National Western Campus to the whole Fast Tracks network. So if you live in Arvada or Golden or out by the airport in Green Valley Ranch, you will now be able to take a train and get to the National Western Stock Show complex on a year-round basis beginning in 2018. The site also, the project also restores some significant buildings. The 1909 Stadium Arena, which was the first building built to replace the circus tent for the first 3 years. We're actually converting that into a year-round marketplace. So how many people have maybe been to Seattle, the Pike Street Market in Seattle? All right, this will be our version of the Pike Street Market, promoting all Colorado-based products. So you want peaches from Palisade, Hatch chilies from Buena Vista, growing Colorado businesses to be a part of this experience. And you know, if you've been there, they throw the fish, right? We're going to throw the ribeye, which is part of our history. This is called Colorado Commons, which is part of the CSU facility as well. Celebrating all 64 counties. And why that's important is this, although this campus is located in Denver, Colorado agriculture is our state's biggest economic driver. $41 billion a year, employs 175,000 people across all 64 counties, and there's not one thing we do in any given day that does not involve agriculture. So this is about not only preserving our past, which is important, but also celebrating the opportunity Colorado has about its future. And we can, with this campus, as it comes online, especially with Colorado State University as one of our key partners, is to talk about how we study global food production and global food security. Colorado can own that space. Own it. And we can generate thousands of new jobs, industries that will grow, study, pilot, and then ultimately implement new food production and new food security issues. So again, this is bigger than the stock show. Certainly the stock show is a benefactor of making sure that they're preserved for another 100 years in terms of that event. They get to be stewards of our history, and then the other partners and the industries that will happen around this facility will make it even more important. A couple more points, and then I'll turn it over to John. You know, we talk a lot about the South Platte River. As part of this project, the last 3 miles of the South Platte, you can't actually get access to because of industrial uses on the river. So again, one of the first things we will do is we will rail off the river and creating an access of over a mile of the river that runs through the national. Most people don't even realize the river is at the National Western because you can't get to it. So recreating or gaining access to the South Platte, healing and restoring the South Platte. So, you know, and hopefully in my lifetime I can take my kids and my grandkids to fish on the South Platte again. That's a goal. And then we have 80 acres of open space up here. We're going to actually be studying that with the neighborhoods this next year to gain access to those 80 acres of open space via the river and the campus. And then again, making new connections here from Elyria, Swansea to the site. So this is a 10-year plus project over 8 phases. The reason that's important is the stock show can't shut down or move away while we rebuild this place. So the planning is all about phasing over the course of a number of years to impress upon you how bold this project is and how important it could be. How many have been to the Anschutz Medical Campus? Either personally or with a family member. Children's Hospital is there. That has been, in fact, they just got an award for being, I think, in the top 5 or 6 around kind of a global research facility around human health. This can be the agricultural version of the Anschutz Medical Campus. With CSU as a premier facility and other partners that will come online, we can make this an agricultural version of the Anschutz Medical Campus for Colorado. So thank you, and I will turn it over to John Zapien.
And I just want to add one other thing because I know it's important, and we looked at it when we were putting ideas up around this campus. There's going to be more than 20 acres of event park. So the nice part about it is
We pointed out.
yeah. So everybody who is concerned about too many events in your park, and I hear that all the time from residents, and is that we'll have 22 acres that we believe, yeah, show right there.
So here's the river, right here.
That's all portable stalls that we are making them portable so you can remove them. And then we will be able to move a lot of this activity off of our parks and move them right out to the National Western where they're going to love it. I mean, that's going to be a place that, first of it, it'll be set up for it, but it'll have shops and restaurants, and so that after these events are over, it's already turnkey. If they need a building or something to have an activity, we'll already have those. And that's first phase, yeah.
Will the stalls then only be moved for the stock
Just
show?
wait till the, forum.
Only be
We'll have
in
conversation after that.
Hello, my name's John Zapien, and you just heard it from the horse's mouth. I want to talk to you a little bit about the other end, not the horse.
Thank you, John.
I want to recognize this face, and I want to recognize definitely this face, and up there. It makes me feel good that you're here today. It makes me feel good. In fact, I feel overwhelmed. First of all, to be here in your presence, and I'll tell you why. In about 1970, that was in the last century, wasn't it? A group of us, and I don't know if you recall or not, we literally marched on city council, and we said, let's make our neighborhoods a better place to live.
Yes.
And that was a cry for a long time.
Yep.
And now it's 2015, and a new century. And when I first met Kelly Leid, I thought, where'd this guy come from? It's been, what, almost 3 years now, isn't it? Yeah. And I thought about what they were talking about, and that neighborhoods along I-70 in the north part of the city need a lifeline. The main benefit neighborhoods are going to receive is grabbing that lifeline that is 2C and hanging on to it to pull us out of disrepair, neglect, over-industrialization, abuse, not pointing a finger at them, but it took place. This is an opportunity to rebuild. And that effort must take place. If Denver is to really be the Queen City of the Plains, it has to include all the neighborhoods.
Yes.
Throughout the city and surrounding areas. And it can be done. Not overnight, this will be a long, long project. But it's the best opportunity in over 100 years for those neighborhoods. My neighborhood, Goldville, one of the oldest in the city. We made the bricks, we made the bacon, the steaks, everything else that the rest of the city ate. And we're still up there. A long time ago, when they built I-70 through there, they thought we'd dry up and go away. But no, when I look at your faces, it's going to give me more strength to go back and do exactly what you've been doing since your inception. The reason neighbors are supporting 2C is twofold. First of all, change. Change in the neighborhood, a change in attitude, but a change in opportunity. There's going to be all kinds of opportunities for the next generation, not from just their neighborhoods, from your neighborhoods as well. New types of careers, new types of professions. And those things they're not pie in the sky. That's a reality. Whoever dreamt that CSU would have a campus where stockyards were, I mean, but it can become a reality. And the only reason that 2C came about and being presented to you here today is that they can do these things. Not just for business, not just for communities, but for everyone involved. And we can all share in it. Whatever opportunities come, it's going to be a lot of work. Yeah, it's going to cost money, but not no new taxes. It's an extension of an existing tax, and we can do it. And with your help and your support on 2C, it will become a reality and something you can talk to your grandchildren about in years to come. Thank you.
Susan, go for it. Susan, do you want to go first?
Sure. I guess, I have John Zapien, who I've known for decades. And I think that if the stock show, if the city cared as much about Swansea, Elyria, Groveville as they're now claiming to care, they wouldn't have tripled the width of a I-70. So, I do think that the improvement at the Platte River is terrific. But I don't think that we, in the list of priorities for our city, including those 3 neighborhoods that have been cut off from the prosperity that the rest of the city has enjoyed over the past decade or so, is not necessarily building a stockyard. And quite honestly, there's a $200 million gap in the finance plan. And when I spoke at great length to Deputy Mayor and City Finance Director, Kerry Kennedy, and I said, how are you going to fill that $200 million finance gap? Her answer was, and forgive me, because I'm going to read it. Kerry said, she speculated that the money might come from increased wastewater fees, selling city-owned property, federal grants, on-site land sales, or concessions. Now, because I read a lot, it's very clear to me that part of the stock show, which, and I'm probably, except for maybe John, the oldest person in the room, and Kelly, you're much too young to remember this, but in 1998, when the city upped $30 million to do some improvements at the stock show, the National Western Association did nothing. They've invested no money in primary beneficiaries. It was interesting to note that they invested, those rich guys, which I'm cool with rich guys, damn near $1 million in winning this campaign so that they don't have to fund any of the improvements of which they are the direct beneficiaries. And the other interesting thing, and which I had a long conversation with Tim Schultz at the Betcher Foundation, the stock show boys and girls have agreed to raise $50 million, but so far they haven't even taken advantage of the technical assistance grant that Betcher has offered them to teach them how to raise money. So I guess I'm feeling like, y'all love the National Western, that's great. But when you look at the list of priorities that benefit the whole city, I think that, the fact that this isn't a new tax, of course, if it weren't a new tax, we wouldn't be voting on it. That's the case. So, number one, is there a better use of those funds? Number two, why isn't there a seat tax as part of this financing? It was interesting in my conversation with Carrie that she never once mentioned a seat tax as contributing to the financing. So I guess I'm parochial enough to think that the city's overall needs are much greater and of higher priority than spending $836 million, although it's pretty clear to me that the $200 million that's missing isn't really accounted for, and that the RTA is not going to come up with $129 million. So I think, I fundamentally think this project may be a good project, but it's not ready for prime time. I'd like to see more details. I did see, Kelly, that you did finally offer up that the governance would be an authority and that the mayor would make those appointments with council approval. I had mixed feelings about that. But I do think that if this is a worthy investment of public funds, that we need more information and more detail.
Hi, excuse me, I have a cold, but I'm Tecza. I've passed around a written document. It's not as slick as theirs because it was printed on my home computer, but I think it has a little more substance. Oh, am I blocking Susan? I'm sorry, Susan.
It's
But I really hope you'll take the time to read it. In the meantime, there are a number of reasons why you shouldn't vote for that in there, and I hope you'd read that. I'd like to talk about some of the reasons that they give why you should. Well, let's first talk, I gotta put this aside. We've heard a lot about the convention center, and you've been told a lot about different places. Have any of you walked down the street and tried to go to the bathroom at the convention center? Anybody? Because I have. And what do they tell you? It's a private place. You can't go. We build it for them, and then it's a private place that we can't use. And the bottom line on this project is we're going to be putting $846 million, giving it to the private sector, handing them over the keys, and then they're going to charge us admission to get in. I don't believe it. We pay for it, we build it, we give it to them, and they charge us admission to get in. But, and these guys talk to you about preserving our cultural heritage. Let's never forget that these are the same guys that when they wanted to build a convention center, and they wanted us to build DIA, and they wanted to build 16th Street Mall, they said the reason we have to do it is to become a world-class city and escape our cow town image. Remember that? Escape our cow. Now, when it means $846 million for the private sector, being a cow town isn't such a bad deal at all. They say it's going to provide 16,000 jobs. 16,000. How many of you believe that? I mean, when they walked up, when they walked up to the State Tourism Board and asked for another $120 million of our tax dollars, and by the way, that money isn't coming from tourist tax, that's coming from our tax. The state told them your economic expectations are wildly exaggerated. 16,000 jobs. Go look at the city budget, Kelly. In 2015, 2014, a great economic year, the entire city of Denver only produced 15,000 new jobs. The biggest employer in the state of Colorado, the University of Colorado Boulder System, only employs 13,000 people. There's no way this project, especially if you consider, they talk about all the money that this project is going to bring into the state. They don't talk about all the money that those multinational corporations take back out of the state with them. They don't calculate that in there. John, my good friend, John, you talk about development in Globeville. Let me tell you, I got to pull my Marco Rubio because of my... anyway. We're going to get a year-round event center down there, Kelly tells you. Why are we going to get it down there? Because no other neighborhood will take it. When they tried to jam it in the city park, they got rejected. You know what, John? They're going to dump it on Globeville. And when they have loud concerts late at night and stone kids are wandering through the neighborhood, you're not going to be so happy with that event center down there. But more importantly than that, you go look at that list of contributors. And you from Los Angeles and from Denver. AED is a concert promoter. They're contributing $20,000 to this project. And by the way, that's not a contribution. That's an investment. That's an investment, and they expect a return on their profit sheets. And you go look down corporate welfare, you go look down all of these contributors. Collect Construction, the people who bring you toll roads, they contributed $15,000. They're in the process of getting a $140 million contract from the city of Denver. Nice return on investment. Dave Kinney contributes $1,000 and gets $36,000 back in consulting fees. CRL Associates contributes $1,000 and gets back $30,000 in campaign management. What all of this is about is corporations making contributions. Look down that list, $1 million in contributions. Look at some of the expenditures on that list. Okay, $700,000 to buy this election in campaign and television advertising. How much of that is going back to the networks outside of the state? Okay, $20,000 to a consulting firm in Alabama. $11,000 to a K Street, Washington, D.C. advising firm. Do you know what K Street is? It's called Gucci Gulch, where all the high-time lobbyists have their headquarters. $11,000 go in there. You know, I got to apologize for a mistake I put in here. Under individual contributors, it's got Butler Snow from Richland, Mississippi. I thought this was some guy from Mississippi that really loved Denver. It turns out Butler Snow is a law firm in Mississippi who, by the way, also gave a maximum $3,000 contribution to Mayor Hancock's re-election campaign to defeat Larry Ambrose. Now, I wonder what they expected in return for that and what they're expecting in return for their $10,000 contribution to this. If you see these people doing what is best for Denver, well, you deserve what you get. You deserve what you get. Anything that is in public interest out of this is going to be an accidental byproduct of the profits that are going to be made by these corporations. There'll be the table scraps from the corporate feast that these people are going to get on this project. Let me tell you, folks, if somebody gave me $770 million, please, somebody give me $770 million, okay? I would think about more than one way to spend that money. As Susan says, okay, there are an incredible number of needs. Have they considered a Lowry kind of redevelopment down at the stock show site that would provide the number of people down there that would get you groceries? Oh, now it's time? You guys had 3 times? Okay, the kind of grocery store and retail stores that neighborhood developed. $770 million, as Susan says, they could give that $70 million to every one of the 11 council districts for improvements in your district. I'm not saying they ought to do that. There are all kinds of things that they might consider doing, but that's not what happens. These guys go in a back room and they say, we got this great plan that could make money for everybody that's listed on this list of contributors, and then they come out and they sell it to the yokels. And folks, you're the yokels, and I'm the yokel, okay? Do they consider multiple alternatives and pick the best one? Absolutely not. Well, I'll tell you, unless they show this yokel that they've considered one more than, oh, by the way, there ain't no such thing as free money. You know darn well that when you go to New York and pay the lodger's tax there, New York sits there and says, oh, Denver's lodger's tax is this high, we can raise ours to meet it, and it's a shell game. It goes back and forth, so you pay it when you go there. I mean, that's the way the game is played. Well, I'll tell you, this yokel ain't voting for it until they show me that they have sat down with many different alternatives, evaluated them, and this is the best alternative for the city of Denver. I hope you'll do the same and talk to your friends about it. Thank you.
Okay. A spirited debate. All right, let's see, Anthony.
First of all, I'd like to know, those who do not know, John Zapien is one of the founders of IMC. Number two, doesn't the stock show land have one owner and the buildings have another owner? The
Current situation?
Yes. The city in Denver owns the building and the National Western Corporation owns the land, or is it vice versa?
So did everybody hear the question? Yes. All right, so the current ownership structure is, the city has made investments in that site. So the city has the underlying deed to the property, you could say, because we've made investments. And there are assets that the Western Stock Show Association, which is a nonprofit, owns assets on that site, like the 1909 building. Under this new configuration with the campus, all assets that the National Western or Western Stock Show Association presently own are transferred to the city. The city will own all the land on the campus and all the buildings on the campus. The one exception could be the Colorado State University facilities that are being funded by the state. Those might be, either might do a long-term land lease or the state might actually own that land. But at the end of the day, of the 270 acres on the campus, either the city or the state will own that property.
And also, is it not true that the National Western Corporation have not lived up to the agreement with the city to maintain the buildings?
Again, did folks, everybody hear that? All right, so the challenge is that the buildings are very, very old, right? They do spend a substantial amount of money annually to try to maintain. You have the 1909 building again. Their ability as a nonprofit to fund the significant capital improvements of those buildings outstrips their financial means.
Susan had something to say.
Susan wants to make a point on this, didn't you? You're shaking your head, Susan.
Well, in all due respect, Kelly's right. The property is in very, very bad condition. But, and this is probably sarcasm, so forgive me, I suspect that some of the very generous donors to the campaign have written bigger checks to the campaign than they've written to maintain and upgrade the buildings that not only they own, but actually the taxpayers of Denver. The only thing we own is the Coliseum, and none of this money is going to the Coliseum. So I think, again, a very legitimate question is, who are the real beneficiaries of this substantial public investment? I don't think the citizens of Denver.
Okay, go ahead.
This is directed at Visit Denver. Because this is an affiliation of registered neighborhood organizations that our sole purpose is for the safety of our neighborhoods. We have a committee, and you talk about the 1.75%. Visit Denver sided with our committee against short-term rentals that do not pay those taxes. We have asked for your support I have asked for the Hotel Motel Association of Washington, who's got lobbies against this, but you have not come to our aid with the city council on opposing short-term rentals that don't pay your lodging tax. Would you explain that?
Yeah. First of all, I want to back up and I'll do this in a minute. I just want to back up because I think there's a big misconception here, like there's this pool of money. First of all, the hotels and the car rentals would not support a tax just to give to you. I know that sounds really odd, but what they will do is they will support a tax. If you endorse it, they'll support a tax to build facilities that will generate more money and people will come in and pay more taxes. So I think there's a big misconception that there's $700 million sitting in a bank account and we could use it a different way. There really isn't. There's a visitor tax that the industry is supporting. The industry is supporting a visitor tax that supports facilities which will drive new demand, which will bring visitors in here that will pay taxes that will alleviate a lot of what we have to do and create jobs and economic impact. So what's that?
I agree with that, and I think the tourism tax, it's clear, but I'm very, very disturbed, and I think it's entirely contrary to Tabor, that it's a forever tax.
Yeah.
We don't do forever taxes.
And, well, it's interesting, so anyway, I'm just going to say, it came up with the question is the forever tax back here too, and I just want to hit that. I think the thought process on that was that what we get stuck in today's world is, what they said is it be used on tourism-related projects. I think that in tourism-related projects, I have to say, is pretty liberal. So if you said, we need to do something that enhances or facilities that are like the stock. So we don't want our facilities to get where we have to come to citizens every day and say, what do we need to fix it? Let me just finish that and I'll get yours. And I want to answer your question.
Can I make a comment?
Our issue right now is we have a government affairs. And what we have to do in the government affairs before we can make a decision. And I will tell you, we are leaning towards protecting our neighborhoods first. Because if you think about our job is to generate tourism and conventions for the economic well-being of the community, our members who pay us, and the residents. That's really what we're thinking. So I think it's a little premature to say that we haven't come out early, and the problem is we have a government affairs committee that we have to go through. We have to sit through city council to see what they're looking at. And then at that point, we will come out with our stance. It's just a very sensitive as you are, but I'm personally on your side because I don't want a lot of people running through my neighborhood that aren't part of us. So that's me, that's Richard Scharf personally. So we're going to look at this as we always do.
We've been looking at it now for almost 2 years.
Yeah,
And the city has heard nothing from your side, so that's
okay. And I will go back and look at that because I appreciate that. Yeah.
But then Susan,
I'm sorry, that gentleman in the back raised his hand.
Susan Tarr.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There are people wanting to respond to what you're saying.
Oh, okay.
That and
Susan
Isabel,
first.
she can't hear, but she's trying to.
Go ahead, Susan.
There's three things. Number one, I completely disagree with, I think there's no defense of a tax that goes on forever. Certainly, you ask the voters, but we already know certainly that this administration is very good at not asking the voters. For example, when you gave away Hansel Park, maybe yes, on the head of the pin, you have the very narrow legal thing not to, but why not default to democracy and ask the voters? When Mayor Hancock had $46 million that didn't get spent for Betcher, actually Mayor John Hickenlooper had $46 million because the symphony was going broke, and he and Jack Inlaw made the wise and prudent decision not to float that bond. Hancock and his group gets into office and they see an unencumbered $46 million, and without going back to the voters and saying, give us permission to spend this money on a new amphitheater in Ruby Hill Park, some improvements to Betcher. I'm just saying, clearly But last time I checked, this is a democracy. All of us in this room, including you, fund your salaries. You work for us. It's our taxes. So just ask me. Don't say it's going to be forever. Don't say you have the legal right to give away a public park. Don't say you have the, slip through in a bond document to reallocate money to amenities that I as a taxpayer and you as a taxpayer didn't pay for. So I recognize that you will not be in office forever, but I have a really hard time with the trust me argument.
I've got a really brief comment, because I want you to listen closely to what Mr. Tharp said in terms of using the money for other purposes. He said that the tourist and lodger industries wouldn't support the tax on that basis and that use. Their notion of government is that we have to get the consent of an industry to tax them, and they get to control how that tax is used. Folks, listen to Bernie Sanders. Here's a homegrown crony capitalism. Industry tells government when they're willing to be taxed and what that tax can be used for. That's their theory of government.
The only thing I'm against cities who have taxed the visitors for their own private use. I'm just telling you that's happening. If you want to look that up, that's what's happened. So I'm just using that as a precedent.
My kids always used to say,
From uptown on the hill. My question is about the financing.
The idea that we're talking about $100 million renovations of the convention center to build office space, we just listened today that Comfort Dental wants to put their name up in Red Rocks, but I haven't heard one mention that private dollars as an investment in an expansion of the convention center is one of the options you've considered. I'd rather see Comfort Dental put a sign up over one of your wings at the convention center than up over Red Rocks. So the question is that $100 million commingled
With the stock show program, which I actually think is an ambitious and worthwhile program to support. The frustration is, where was the decision made
to take a bond issue that originally included language that it would run from 2023 to 2038, 15 years, and be brought back before the people of Denver for any future needs? When was that language changed and why? To put it into perpetuity. The biggest crisis, the biggest number one mentioned issue on 16th Street Mall from tourists and residents, people who will be connected to that part of our city through Union Station, the expansions happening there, is the number of people in crisis that conjugate in that part of the city. But not one mention on enhancing the quality of experience for a tourist or the quality of life for a resident, or to address the needs of that crisis residents of our city and downtown. Nothing, not one mention of that. So that tax into perpetuity, that's my biggest contention with what you put forward. And it's why I personally can't speak on behalf of Uptown, but I cannot support it, even though I think that the project is ambitious and worthwhile for the city.
That's a good, very good comment. And what attendance increase are we going to see? And the fact that this building is going to be elevated, so you're going to get a little better profile, very similar to what you saw, with the signage around the city in some of these other venues. I think the National Western has done a good job with Paul Andrews increasing sponsorship revenue as well. So we are going to look at that. That's a really good point. Second thing is, the reason why the mall has not come up is because they don't have a plan. And they are, on the October 21st, they're going to release a plan. Brad Buchanan with the City Planning Office has had the company look at how to redevelop it in such a way that it'll be more visitor and business friendly and good for residents. And then Tammy Dorr has what they call a security plan, because as you know, we do have some issues down there. And in fact, something just happened last night down there, I guess. So when that number comes out, there is actually funding already in place from the Urban Renewal Authority to do some things with that. And I do believe that what you meant on the idea of this tax extension, what happened is when the idea came up, we as an industry complained that a lot of the facilities get old and tired and there's no reinvestment, and it's hard to go back to the voters, and these are visitor taxes. So we thought, what a perfect way to, we asked the city, we said, can you put in tourism related projects which include them all? And so that we would have the ability, now this is not we, but the city and the city council, that's how this is structured, that the city council would determine where that fund goes from this point on. So those extra taxes, not the industry, but it's yours and my city council folks that would decide where those would go. And it would help on these capital improvements so we don't run into the next National Western that's beat down after 20, 30 years. So I believe, now I was not part of that, and Susan, I was not part of Betcher, and I wasn't, part of all that. But I believe that's their intent, but that's a really good point.
Okay, we have one last comment to add to counter what,
Oh, it's not about that. It's the last comment on this whole thing. And, it has to do with my good friend John Zapien. John and I, you want to talk about going back days, we were captains in the Democratic Party when Diana Delegate was one of my committee people. She's obviously gone a lot farther in life than either John.
What about Pat? Pat, you forgot about Pat.
Anyway, the point is, if you look at the bottom of that list of expenditures, you will see John Zapien, $2,500.
Yes.
I was going to bring a paid spokesperson sign for John to wear this time. I don't begrudge John that. I really don't. I just wish he would have held out for more. And the reason is, if you look down that list of expenditures, as much as I can figure out, that's the only expenditure that's going into Globeville. And that's exactly what's going to happen in this project. Millions going out of state and tabled scraps going into Globeville. Thank you.
So Larry,
all right, so,
Larry, let me, because this is not.
Can you get
So let me just, so thank you for, investing your time. As a third generation Colorado kid, whose mom actually went to this school, I love this city and I love this state, and we have an opportunity to do something about it. But I just want to comment, of the 856 million, and this is all online, you're super transparent, the first 300 million actually goes back towards Globeville and Elyria Swansea. Roads, bridges, fix the river, get the rail, get the industrial uses off the river. And the cities, I can't do anything, or we can't do anything about the past. What we can do is about our future. City owns the assets. National Western and CSU are tenants on the campus. They pay rent. The city runs. At the end of the day, the great democratic process is you get to read and decide whether you vote yes or no. That's all we can ask for. Thank you.
Very quick final comment from
Larry.
one more comment from Susan.
I think Kelly did a really good job of summing it up, and I encourage all of you to read the ballot initiative very carefully, and I think there's still some big questions hanging out there, which is where is the missing $200 million part of this plan going to come from? It can't, in my view, it cannot come from capital improvement budgets. It cannot come from increased fees to general residents. The fact that there is no seat tax in this finance package is shameful. So I'm not saying this is a bad deal. I'm just saying it's not a cooked deal. So go back to your tape and give us more detail, give us more information, and we'll have another shot at it. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for coming. We have to get out of here at this point, but we can talk to these people individually, and thank you all for participating, and Susan, thank you, Chad, thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
And also Dan Kelly, thank you.